I'm hoping that you can't hear my mother and father talking in the background. If you're wondering where I got my loud voice from, hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I am going to be talking about nothing in particular, and don't you just love that? I'd like to say that I've been up to quite a lot since I last spoke to you. But I haven't. I asked in my last one of these videos, did anyone want to see the videos that I'd recorded and had on the back burner? So I spent the entirety of my Wednesday last week editing videos to go up on Wednesday and to go up on Thursday. And so you can watch all of them somewhere. I might leave links, I might not. Click on my channel thing, you might be able to watch them. Anyway, so that was Wednesday. Thursday I read, Friday I was back in work, Saturday I was back in work, and we're going to talk about work for a moment. We're currently only allowing 3 customers into the shop at a time. This is so that should there be any queries, staff members can still go out into the shop and keep their distance. And we have a responsibility not just to ourselves but to our customers to make sure that everyone is doing their best to be safe. So you can imagine my surprise when I walked out into the shop on Saturday afternoon and discovered that my shop was now full of customers, as though people hadn't been paying attention to the thing to stand outside and wait, simply because it was raining. There are many different facets to my character. Oftentimes when I'm at work, I am the same as I am here. I'm sarcastic and I'm getting my job done. Saturday, I had to become managerial. Now, I am not the manager, my manager is there, but she was doing something. And I can't leave it up to a volunteer to become managerial, can I? A volunteer telling a volunteer what to do and what's gone wrong just isn't right. And I'll admit, I did become something of the tyrant. I have a volunteer on the till who is supposed to be watching what's going on outside. Currently, we aren't touching any of the items people bring to the till. We're asking them to pack them themselves. If it's clothes, put the hangers away themselves. Then we're leaving them, disinfecting them later on. It takes more time, but it's all we can do. And I've told a lot of people this story already, and I feel like coming here and mentioning my tyrannical behaviour might make me able to sleep at night. My volunteer, bless her, is 86 years old. And 86 years old gets incredibly bored. And there's a lady who was in and extremely lively, had arrived about half an hour earlier. We're asking people not to really browse or hang around too much, but that went out the window here. Now, firstly, after I ascertained who had been in the shop for the longest and who had been in the shop for the least amount of time, I asked the people who just arrived, please go, just stand outside and wait, like you're supposed to do, like it says on the A-frame I've got outside. I don't care that it's pouring down with rain. If it's that important that you come into my charity shop, you can do the same as everyone else and wait outside. Yes, managerial Charlie also rants a bit. So I go to my volunteer and I mention she's not supposed to be packing anything, and get told, well, this lady keeps bringing stuff. And so I say, if things were that bad, you should have just called one of us. Because guess what? I don't mind upsetting people. I've done it for years. You lot have seen the way I talk about books on this channel. Do you really think I have a problem with upsetting people? I once went to an event and read about this and said the line from Our Doris and said that veganism could just be cured with a bacon sandwich. Firstly, I'm a vegetarian. Secondly, I don't believe that. I just said it for a joke. Our Doris is that type of person. Someone came over to me, very upset. I accepted their upset. Someone else got upset about Coronation Street once and how my book wasn't exactly like Coronation Street. Do you know what? I don't mind. I don't mind upsetting people. Why? Because I sold my soul for a bread oven in 2007 and I never looked back. So, I say to this volunteer, I said, right, it's nearly 1 o'clock, you may as well go home, because we have 2 shifts and that's fine. So, then I become tyrannical. The person who's been in the shop, filling up all this space, where my volunteer has had to put herself in harm's way and not touch anything, get her to the till. Right, what you're going to do is you're going to take all the hangers off those clothes, show me the label, and then you're going to put them in a bag yourself, and then you're going to leave. Right? Just make proper northern Charlie, proper northern managerial angry Charlie coming out here. Even the voice changes. I become strict. I stop chatting. And she's apologising to me like, I'm sorry, I've not been out of the house in 10 weeks and I just love charity shops. That's fine. Put your anger in the box, please. And she keeps apologising to me now. There reaches a point, there's no point apologising to me, love. The damage is done. You've put my volunteer at risk. My volunteer's now going home upset because I've had to say something to her that I don't like having to tell anybody off, especially not when there's customers around. But I'm sorry about it. And this woman I'm like, no, just in the box and then get out of here. Yes, she spent a lot of money in the shop, but at the same time, I don't care how much money you are spending in my shop if you aren't just going to be putting my volunteers at risk, but other customers. So, there may be another complaint going to head office about me. A customer once, there was a customer in the shop who said to me, we're about to have a trustee come in. She didn't end up coming in. And my manager says to me, that's a trustee, you know, be kind. And I said, you said that because of the complaint I got when I used to work in Congleton. And one of the customers, because it's very community-based is our shop, said, how could someone complain about you, Charlie? And my manager said, just be yourself. And I said, that's what the complaint was about. Because my problem is that I don't change my behaviour for anyone, really. And so I didn't really change my behaviour with this customer. I was just strict to the point, get out my store. It's not even my shop. I'm not even the manager. I'm not in charge. I keep saying this on these videos, that if, you know, one day there's going to be a complaint and they're going to be like, sod off, Charlie. But I think with the new regulations and more duty of care I've got to the volunteers, it makes me much more unkind to anyone who toes the line, such as somebody who didn't want to use the hand sanitizer. And it's like, well, you're not coming in the shop then. If you don't use the hand sanitizer, you're not coming in. And at the moment, we've ended up with this new struggle because originally, when we came back, we wanted to do a cycle of donations. And so everything's got to stand for 72 hours. And we have a container at the back separated into 3 sections. So you'd fill one side one day, the middle the next day, and the third bit the day after that. But once those parts are filled, that's it. Our head office sent out a message telling people they could all bring their donations down from the 17th of June. So they all turned up on the same day thinking we were asking them to donate that day. And it ended up getting full straight away. And so we ended up having to start turning people away and then asking them to come back another day. That was 2 weeks ago. For the last 2 weeks, we've been asking people now to come back a week later. And it has now reached a point where saying to people, I'm sorry, we don't actually know when we're going to be able to get through this stuff. Because as well as all that, previously the container was filled with all of the stock we had to get out for summer. We start putting our summer stock out in March. We've been in lockdown since March, and therefore we are currently about 3 months behind in getting the stock out that we want to get out. And with having to quarantine hangers and everything, we just aren't finding the time, and even with reduced hours of being open to try and get the shop replenished, there just isn't enough time in the day to get all of the work we want to get done. So we now just haven't been able to accept donations, and we're hoping that within the fortnight that might change. But even working twice as hard, it's not happening. Some volunteers weren't able to come back due to the new regulations, and yeah, it's a tough time to be working in a charity shop where you are constantly going through donated items and you don't know where they've come from. So yeah, at the same time, I think it's tough anywhere for any sort of industry. Been a bit of a tyrant this week, feel a bit bad about it, but not enough. And did say the line, if me getting angry is going to stop someone catching coronavirus, then I'm fine with it, because their family wouldn't be happy with me if I'd ended up being in charge that day and their family member went home and caught something deadly when they're of a significant age. Either way, I found a new shirt at work last week and I bought it. Because the shirt that I was wearing I absolutely hated, and I went into work, saw what I looked like in the mirror and donated it there and then. Something we haven't talked about, and I've been here for weeks now and I've not mentioned it, RuPaul's Drag Race All Stars 5. I've been looking forward to this series since I first saw the rumours last year, and I have known the twists. I've watched all the spoiler videos. I know what's happening, and you know something? even when you're watching it, I end up disagreeing with the decisions judges are making. And I've been having chats with Charlie Brooke about it because I feel like it's been edited with a certain type of intent now, and I feel like everybody knows who's going home in an episode, even the producers and the judges, because they want to give a certain type of storyline, and it's just changed my experience of watching the show. I feel like it's a very manufactured series, but at the same time, if the person I want to win wins, will I feel the same way? I did end up reading some books this last week. I finally read The Innocents by Michael Crummey that I had to read for the BookTube Prize, and I finished reading Kingdom of Souls by Rena, Barron, and I also read Forced Out by Kevin Maxwell, and I've read Rainbow Milk by Paul Mendez, but I won't be talking about those books in this video because I've just recorded a 40-minute long wrap-up, and once I've edited that down, it'll be about 25 to 30 minutes, so do I really want to go more in depth here? No. Writing-wise, I was trying to focus on the children's book last week. I know that I mentioned about changing something, and then I went back and changed something again. And I'm just trying to figure out these final few chapters now. And it's more difficult than I'd anticipated, really, because there are things that need to happen. I'm just not sure how they're going to yet. I drove to Poynton yesterday when the shop was closed, simply so I'd have a quiet place in which to take a phone call from Dane of Dane Reads, which might go on to his radio show at some point. Now, I talked about my writing there, and thinking back on this interview, I am apologetic to Dane immediately because I feel like I was just incredibly sarcastic, and I don't feel like that comes across well on the radio. I also worry I talked about my finances too much because that's all that's in my head at the moment. One good thing that came from it is that it inspired me. It seems that if I talk about Doris sometimes to people and the work that I've put into Doris over the years, if I begin talking about the fact that I'm working on the final book, then it immediately makes me want to start working on the book. And so I was driving home, I was like, I really want to work on Doris tomorrow. And so I've got a bit to write up from this notebook here. I don't know whether I've mentioned before, but I started using this notebook last year. I like these blank notebooks that you can get from Sainsbury's to write Our Doris in. I don't know why, it's just something that started a few years ago, and now whenever I'm writing Doris, I write it in a blank notebook. I didn't realise that I've been writing in it upside down for the longest time, so now we have one side that's written the correct way for the children's book, and then Our Doris is completely upside down. I've been inspired to finish this chapter, which will finally, after all these months of talking about it, see an end to the first part of this book, which will bring us to 30,000 words. And then I begin a next part, which goes into something I mentioned in my 5 years of Our Doris video, and an aspect of that where I'm tying up loose ends. And this is something that I've seen as a major loose end for years. And as soon as I had this idea, I was like, this is how we fix that. But I can also see it being another 30,000 words. And that is something that I've got in my head at the moment, is that I have 3 parts to this story. Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3 will be 30,000 words each. And then I will have a final story that will wrap everything up. I don't know whether it's going to be a bit of a time slip yet. I don't know whether it's going to be one of these cases similar to a certain book that I won't mention, where we flash forward, because I don't like the idea of that. I don't like the idea of ending everything on a flash forwards to show where the characters end up. But at the same time, I feel like it could be useful. I don't know. I feel like it'd be nice to end this story with some festivities after everything that goes on in this book. There is definitely still humour in the book, but the more I write, the more I recognise that the way I write humour has changed. And so there will be some aspects that are quite similar to Our Doris and Indisputably Doris, in that it's very quick and it's thought about, but then there'll be some times where I'll think of something funny, but someone might not necessarily get the joke, or there are more moments of writing and setup. And I do think that in editing, that's something I'll have to look at and maybe manage better. But for the moment, I'm just enjoying the journey, and it's something that I really want to be working on today. Have I watched anything? Talking heads. I need to talk about talking heads. So I saw on Twitter last week from Wilson Sugar that Talking Heads had got a remake for 2020. Apparently they were filmed during lockdown. Now, the first one that I got to watch was Monday night with Jodie Comer, and that was... I can't even remember the title of it now, but either way, I didn't like it. I really like Jodie Comer as an actress. Killing Eve is fantastic. With this one, I felt as though she was trying to emulate Julie Walters too much. And when I started watching, the character began with a Liverpudlian accent. Then it went a bit Brummy. Then it went a bit Southern. And the accent was all over the place. And I don't know whether that was something she'd been asked to do, but at the same time, I did feel as though she was trying so hard to sound like Julie Walters in her version of it. That was all I could focus on, and I just wanted to see Jodie Comer's take on Talking Heads, as well as the fact that I feel like Alan Bennett writes in a very stylised fashion, something that I wished to emulate with Our Doris. It's something that I really looked hard at when I was at uni and when I was really searching for the voice for Our Doris. Therefore, I feel like I have a great idea of how Alan Bennett's work is supposed to be presented, and there were so many great lines that Jodie Comer swallowed up. So she'd get to the end of a line and she'd whisper it, or she'd say it in a way that the emphasis was wrong, and I wasn't a fan, and that one felt like a miss for me. And because that was the first one that I watched, I then have then all my hopes are dashed about watching any of the early ones, because I feel like, well, if that's how I feel about this one, then I'm just going to end up perpetually disappointed by the entire series of new monologues. Luckily, nobody has tried to do Thora Hirds. Apparently, they're saying it's because they couldn't allow any older actors to do Thora Hirds parts. Personally, I think it would be very difficult to take on something that Thora Hird made her own, but that might just be me being a bit prejudiced, because Thora Hird's Talking Heads monologues, A Cream Cracker Under the Settee, which is acted by Thora Hird, is the first Talking Heads monologue that I saw when I was at uni that really spoke to me, because I really like writing in the fashion that people talk, and it was this discovery of Alan Bennett's work that I hadn't had before, and it, sent me on this journey to end up writing Our Doris and working on comedy and this way of writing. And so the idea of anyone trying to take on Thora Hird's work scares me a little bit, because I feel like nobody could really do it justice. I even considered Julie Walters, and I thought she might have been able to, but I just don't know that she would, and I fear anyone trying to. I know that this is the way of the world and these things were meant to be acted, and I don't want Alan Bennett's work to be forgotten, but at the same time, I'm wary, especially after seeing Jodie Comer's take the other day. Music-wise, I spent ages the other night trying to find a song that I'd heard earlier this year by a band of sisters. Finally found it by searching my YouTube watch history, Stereo Jane if you must know, and I don't know why I bothered looking for them, because I realised why I didn't actually remember the song, and that's because I'm not a fan of it. I think that's me done for the day. What have you been reading this week? What have you been writing? What have you been watching? What have you been listening to? I hope that you got something out of this video besides sheer boredom. And until next time, that is all. These are all faces I make for my dog. Well, not even my dog. My sister's dog, because my dog is still reliably dead.